Let's head into the last empty places with author Peter Stark and broadcaster Jimmy Mack. A podcast about the adventure of getting lost to find yourself. Join Peter and Jimmy as they head into places where sometimes the only lights are the stars, and the only guide, your wits.
As I was going over my notes for the second episode of The Last Empty Places with Peter Stark, Jimmy Mack here, by the way, I was putting the notes together and had a playlist on, Peter. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
I had a playlist on, and I didn't do this on purpose. And so the first song I picked was St. Dominic's Preview by Van Morrison. It played itself out, and then I had it on shuffle, which meant it just was picking songs. And I have a couple of playlists. It started picking songs. Here's the songs that it picked. I Can't Find My Way Home by Blind Faith.
Oh, I love that song. I love that song.
Caravan by Van Morrison. Thanks for Sending Me an Angel by the Talking Heads. When Morning Comes by Hall & Oates. Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. And then Helpless, the live version during the last waltz by Neil Young and the band.
Those are all so good.
Such good songs, right? I mean, just amazing. I began to start kind of thinking about this, and in regards to some of the things that you and I had talked about wanting to talk about. And I said to myself, how many songs are about figuring out space? I mean, Helplessly Hoping, I'm Wasted and I Can't Find My Way Home. Thanks for Sending Me an Angel is about somebody who is figuratively and literally lost, and an angel shows up to get them home. When the Morning Comes reminded me that you can be lost at night and yet find your way home when the sun rises. And it just went on, and it finally ran out of steam only at Madame George. Although when I went and looked up Madame George as a song, it's from Van Morrison's Astral Weeks. Okay. When I looked it up, it's a 9-minute song, but it really is about saying goodbye to his small town life and headed out to a world of adventure, about saying goodbye to all the familiar, sort of the Irish version of Under Milkwood. Time to go out there and say goodbye to the small town and say hello to the big giant world. And so I'm putting together these notes and chapters of certain books we had talked about, reading quotes that we had shared and all this stuff. And being lost, literally, it's one of those words, just like thing, where it is loaded with multitudinous numbers of meanings. And I thought a good place to start off, we talked about the idea of being empty and places. What being lost, I just kind of wanted you to kind of start there and dig in and take us to wherever the words lost make you think about.
Yeah. As you say, that's multitudinous meanings that there's a lot to explore literally there. And I'm just thinking of kind of taking off from our last episode where we were talking about unfamiliar terrain, the unknown, as being an empty place. And I think that is so much the metaphor also for being lost, is that you are in an unfamiliar place. You are in the unknown. I mean, literally in the unknown in this metaphorical way. I mean, actually, literally and figuratively. And when you're navigating, you're marking your way, essentially, in unfamiliar terrain. However, when you're lost, it's the point where you lose your navigation marks and you literally lose your bearings. And if you've ever done that, really in the wilderness or not, I mean, well, in the city, I mean, it happens all the time. It happens a lot in the city.
I can't tell you the number of times where I thought I had a handle on where I was going. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't, and I can't see anything that I saw on the way here, or I drifted into my own thoughts. I stopped being aware of my surroundings.
You stopped being aware, yeah.
And I walked past too many things that I didn't mark in my brain. Absolutely.
Well, but one of the things that's just bizarre, I find, is, this has happened to me like in the wilderness pretty profoundly, in a scary way, but it happens in the city too. It's like, being out in the wilderness, in the mountains, in the woods, and thinking I knew where I was and thinking I knew which way to go. And then I say, well, maybe I better check the compass. And I look at the compass, and my first reaction is, this compass is off. It's wrong. Because that's totally the wrong direction from the way my brain says north is. It's like my brain just denies it. It denies it.
Wow.
And it's just a bizarre feeling. And then it's almost like I have to rewire my brain to get my bearings back. I mean, in terms of north, south, east, west, like literal compass bearings. But I think that's really what we're talking about here, the art of getting lost and found again, is to get to that point where your bearings are so off, or you have no bearings. And it's this, it's kind of it's almost like a physical state that it sends you into. And I think some of the reading we've done, is actually some of the scientific reading actually talks about that physical state, that when people literally get geographically lost, that they slip into instantly. And it's also true that losing your bearings in an emotional sense. And then I was thinking, even, like in a relationship, and that all of a sudden, where is this going? I didn't expect this to go this way at all. Suddenly it's like off the rails or whatever.
Anne Bogart talks about this in a relationship. She says, one of the things about love at first sight is we feel disoriented.
Yeah. Right.
That when we fall in love at first sight, there's a disorientation that then, basically knocks us off of our axis. And that's another great expression. We get knocked off our axis.
Or the axis changes to this other person, basically. And then I was thinking about, that it comes up in conversation all the time. I say it, I'm lost. Like in conversation with my wife, and she's making some argument, and I'm not totally tuned in or whatever, or you're in a classroom, and in school, and you lose what the teacher or professor is saying.
You weren't paying attention. You go too far inside,
or the teacher or professor is going so fast that you're not intellectually keeping up.
Slow down, I can't keep up.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Slow down, I can't keep up. Can we repeat that again? Can we go back? And by the way, I often have real problems with teachers who get aggravated at students for asking them to repeat the information. Now, look, I know that there's some students who strategically slow things down in the hopes that they can actually postpone when the test happens, et cetera. There's all kinds of great in-house student strategies. The great joke I make about students all the time is they don't read a damn thing except the syllabus, and when it comes to the syllabus, they turn into depositional attorneys. No. On page 3, you said that I would get the A if Okay, all right. But a lot of teachers get very, very aggravated at students sometimes, and I want to say, we were in a meeting once, Peter, where somebody said in the room, teaching Theater 101, somebody said, I can't believe these kids don't know. They don't know who Tennessee Williams is. And the man who ran the program turned to him and said, well, what an honor. You get to be the one that actually instructs them on who he is, which means they'll have the right vision of him.
Oh, good.
And that's a thing, too, about the idea that we'll get to this with the hero's journey stuff, but the idea that we often get lost, and sometimes deliberately, is because we go out there without a guide, because we don't have a map, and that you make a decision to get lost. And people tell the people that all the time, by the way, get lost.
Oh, yeah, that's
hit the bricks, get lost. But often we make a decision to get lost when we decide not to bring a map, not to bring a compass, which, by the way, you don't have to bring a map, guys. Please bring a compass. But not to bring a compass, unless, of course, it's a deliberative act where you don't bring a compass because you've actually done a weather survey and know that the skies are going to be clear and you know the whole drill. But I think part of getting lost as a deliberate strategy requires that you are eschewing mentorship. That you don't have a guide.
Interesting.
That you don't have a guide, and whether it's a GPS, a map, a compass, that you make an active choice to see where it takes you. And that's deliberately getting lost, as opposed to the other thing that we're talking about.
In a way, it's a way of testing yourself in the circumstances that you're talking, that you're intentionally putting yourself in the situation where you don't have your bearings or you're likely to lose them. And then the challenge is to is to find your way out of that unknown space.
Yeah, and that's the thing about getting lost too, and that's why it has this kind of common language, because you can get lost geographically, you can get lost emotionally, you can lose the thread of a conversation, you can lose your way, meaning like your morals or your, and sometimes like losing your way morally doesn't just mean you break bad or anything, but it's just things that you believed in, things that you held, the idea that, a lot of people in the late 50s and early 60s, a lot of people the boomers lost their way. That the things that they were told and the millennials in many ways, because of the Great Recession, lost their way.
Right.
That the things that they had been promised, you're told, follow this route and it will get you to the success you deserve. Everybody should go to college. And a lot of people followed those routes and found themselves, they got to the end of that journey and were just lost.
Where the landscape is different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you ended up going into a territory that wasn't empty.
Yeah.
I mean, in the case of the recession of 2008, 2009, it was an empty place.
Unfamiliar too.
The money was gone,
right?
Literally, and that's a really kind of fascinating thing. And the idea that I think the idea of physically going out into geographical places where you can get lost and doing it on purpose to some degree is a great way for setting yourself up for success later on down the line when the metaphorical losing it, I'm losing it. Another great expression when people are going crazy or people on their last nerve. I'm losing it with you guys. I'm about to lose it. And so there's all kinds of ways of getting lost, which is why I think actually getting lost might be one of the great unexplored strategies for life balance ever kind of conceived of. When have you really been lost? When have you been like, I'm screwed?
I was about to ask you the same question.
I had moments as a kid where I was completely panicked. I mean, bicycle riding back in the 70s. Oh, Peter. I mean, there are times we went out I always say that the boundaries of childhood have to be consistently tested, and you have to move. If you have any sense of adventure, you have to move past the pale. You've got to go past the pale.
A really interesting concept.
There be dragons. You got to go to places. But there were times when I would rode my bike into neighborhoods, and suddenly I'm like, I have no idea how to get out of this neighborhood. I remember that feeling one time. Like it was by myself too, and had no idea how I was going to get back. And that's like my first memories of that, of like and people were panicked, Peter. I mean, even for the 70s, even for like when that wild and free childhood that all those people had. I got back home and people were on the lawn panicked about where I had gone, because the sun had gone down, because the lights, the street lights had come on, and I didn't know which street I was on. Now, eventually I found my way back to a thoroughfare that I knew that one, but I got lost in the tangle of a suburban sprawl.
Well, and there's also something about getting lost at night, when it's dark, that throws a whole new dimension into it, that I think there's such a human instinct. I mean, I've really felt this, like in Africa, among other places, but when the sun goes down, it's like, wow, you really want to be in a place that's home, in front of a fire, in a safe space. And I think that's just so much part of the human instinct to seek that, and or create it yourself. If you're camping, you stop and you set up your camp and you build a fire or whatever. So I think getting lost when it's dark is a sort of it's a profound way of getting lost. The time I think that really comes back to me when we're talking about that disorientation and the moment of panic and what do you do? So this is when I first got to Montana in the early 1980s, and I was working part-time as a newspaper feature writer, reporter here in Missoula. And the guy who was the head of photography, a guy named Carl DeVaz, we liked to hike, and he was really into wilderness hiking. And so we came up with, I can't think of quite how. There's a beautiful mountain range here called the Swan Mountains, and it's on the edge of this huge wilderness area called Bob Marshall Wilderness. Which Carl and I did at one point hike across the whole thing, which is like 80 miles. But at this trip, we were going to hike along the crest of the Swan Mountain Range. And, this is a really rocky range, and it's above, the tops are above tree line. They're beautiful alpine lakes kind of down below a bit. And this was in I think it was in June. And, here in Montana, depending on the winter, in these mountains, and a lot of mountains, there's still a lot of snow in June. And so there was snow, I think on the snow had melted on the west and south side of these mountain peaks, but not on the north side. And so like on our second day or third day, we had climbed over various kind of sub peaks and, and rocky sub peaks, and, which requires some scrambling up, hand over hand, but not like if I fall, I'm dead scrambling. And, we had big, heavy backpacks on.
It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, but ain't going to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And we had big, heavy backpacks on, and we brought ice axes, kind of just in case. And so we finally got up to one of the highest peaks of this range on like the third day. And the only way we could kind of, the crest was so jagged and rocky, these big kind of chunks of rock, and that you just couldn't get past. The only way to get past, we thought, was to drop down to the right, to the northeast side.
I was just about to talk about the idea that sometimes you get lost because you know the way, but the way is trapped.
Oh my God, yeah. And so we started just below the crest, but we were down on the north side, and we worked our way farther along, and then we were going hand over hand. And then, I just remember looking down and saying, oh my God, it was nothing but a straight drop for maybe 1,500 feet down to an ice field down below. Oh. And we had, these big heavy packs, and it was like, it was almost like too spooky to go back the way we'd come. And there was a big patch of snow, like a snowdrift. And I remember just starting to kind of panic and think, we got to get out of here, and taking my ice axe and kicking my feet into the snowdrift and traversing across it, for maybe 50 feet. And it was just attached to rocks, and it could have easily just pulled off that whole snowdrift and dropped down in the 1,500 feet really easily. And, so like my heart is totally racing. It's like, I'm totally freaked out. And then Carl comes across too, and we pause, and it's like, I'm really freaking out here. And at that point I was still smoking. And I said, well, I'm going to like sit down and have a cigarette and think this thing over. Like, what do we do? It just seemed like we were totally trapped. And so I sat down and had a cigarette, which Carl was always grateful for because it gave him a break too. And then I started thinking, well, we can't go down unless we want to die. That would be a plummet 1,500 feet straight. Going back is really scary, and going forward, it looks like a death trap. And so it's like, what do we do? And, and you have to remember these are huge, heavy packs with all our camping gear.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like we're all that. Well, I mean, we're balanced and we're strong,
but it's the extra horse in young Washington.
It's the extra horse.
It's like, we need this, but there's going to come a point where we got to eat the horse.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody's got to go, and it ain't going to be me, and it ain't going to be you. It's going to be the horse.
And you talk about going with a map or without a map or with a compass. We had a map that was the most accurate map you could have. A topographical map of the USGS.
But what does it tell you?
It tells you, wow, this side of the mountain's really steep, but it doesn't. It doesn't show you like a picture of it,
our reality confirms the map.
Yeah.
The map says it's really steep. It's really steep.
And then, so I sat there and smoked this cigarette and thought, well, you can't go back, can't go forward, can't go down. And I thought, well, maybe we can go up instead. And so I looked up, and right above us, it was like a keyhole through the rocks, through the ridge, and it came out the other side. And which was a gentler side of this ridge. And so we literally crawled through this keyhole and came out the other side. And now we're in it's still really steep, but it's not going to kill you steep kind of situation. And it was like, wow, it was like kind of like this magical mystery opening in the rocks.
Well, it's a high too, isn't it? It's like I took the note. There is no more dangerous place, and there is no place of greater relief than the moment when you finally realize, oh, we might get out of this.
Yeah, it's incredible relief.
And it's incredible relief, but it's also I always call it a danger point too, because I've always said that when you're 1 foot out of the trap, you're only 1 foot away from the trap.
Let me finish the story because that's exactly what we're saying.
Here we go.
We're home free, and we just have to get down this steep slope. And I think I'm trying to think that if it was the same day or the next day, but we got partway down this really steep slope, and there was a little flat area where we set up our tent, and then the next day we were going to hike out. We said, okay, we're kind of abandoning this walk along the ridge line. We've done enough, and head down all the way down to the valley, thousands of feet below. And you have to remember, this is like, there are no paths up here. This is total wilderness. It's the first time I saw it. The only time I've really seen a grizzly bear, mother and cubs in the wild, was up in these bases.
You buried the lead. You realize that, but go on, please.
Well, fortunately, it was at a distance. And so then, after this harrowing experience on the ridgetop, we camped, and then we got up the next morning, and everything was fogged in. And so we packed up our stuff. It might have been the same day. I can't remember, but we somehow like walked into the fog, and the mist, which was it was like rising up from the valley. The clouds were forming on their way up the mountain, and now we're walking this mist, and it's like, something doesn't feel right about this. And, I think we're trying to walk downhill, figuring that's the way to go. And then after a while, it just doesn't feel right. And so we take out a compass and check the compass. And it's like, that compass is all wrong. It's like, that was one of the times where it's just like, I completely denied the accuracy of the compass.
You were going back.
And we were going, I can't even remember which way we were going, but we were going the wrong way.
It was
wrong. And, okay. And we thought we had it nailed down, like we were going the right way, but now we're in this mist, and it's like, oh, you are so turned around. And so fine, I think we literally had to follow a compass reading down this long mountain face through the woods, and finally we came out on a Forest Service logging road and walked to it. I don't know. We must have hitchhiked somewhere in there, but anyway, that's the story about being, kind of a double whammy lost, and one, like actually knowing geographically where you are, but really having no bearings whatsoever.
Yeah, and it ties into this chapter you sent my way, which was just incredible in regards to. I mean, there's a lot of research in it, a lot of studies that go on in it. But tell our listeners about this book, because, like I said, it is available online, chapters of it, and the chapter that you and I both read for today's show.
Well, you go ahead. I mean, you took some good notes.
Well, it's a book about why people get lost,
which is the title.
Yeah, I'm not going to do damage to the name of the author other than say it's Dudchenko. I think it's Dudchenko is the best way to kind of pronounce it. But what he kind of does in this chapter on getting lost and in this book is he's really looking at the science of getting lost. I mean, and there is some in his intros and conclusions, there is some poetic writing that goes on there that makes it accessible. But it was so fascinating because so much of what he looks at is scientific attempts to kind of figure out if human beings have a magnetic impulse, if how much distance between one space and another a human being can remember without having to refix the point. Studies where bus windows were blacked out for students who were then brought from their school to another location, and then asking them to figure out whether or not they knew which direction they had come from.
In other words, really precise scientific studies about orientation.
Real attempts, putting magnets on one group of kids and just putting pieces of metal on another, not telling them which was which, giving, control groups, all that kind of stuff, see if we have any kind of magnetic sense, all of that stuff playing through. And ultimately, the real value of the book, if you guys get a chance to look at it, Why People Get Lost, is that he really kind of lays out how we go about the business of finding ourselves, how we as human beings locate ourselves. And I have to tell you, you and I were talking a little earlier. My father and I had a day of shopping, and I had to stop by the studio to pick up the microphone that I am using currently right now. And on the way back, and my father knows the city of New Orleans, Peter, to perfection. He wasn't paying attention to where we were, and I made a turn to take a genuine shortcut, not like a clever shortcut, but a way to avoid traffic. And I was on this street, and he looked up and he went, "I have no idea where I am." And it was interesting because it's very much New Orleans. It's oak trees and those old shotgun houses. And he goes, "I have no idea." As he's saying it the second time, he looks to his right and he goes, "Oh, there's St. Rose of Lima. I know where I am."
That's so cool.
And that moment, I burst into laughing. He's like, "Don't be laughing at an old man for getting lost." I said, "No, I've been reading this material about how people go about the business of finding themselves and how people go about the business of not being lost. Like if you don't want to be lost." We've talked a lot about the idea of getting lost. Well, we actually haven't gotten into why some people in America want to get lost, but the idea of how we find ourselves, how we literally find out where we are, is they break it down. And it's really interesting. He talks about the idea that we have landmarks, and his three kind of searches or three kinds of ways of finding your way, which are an oriented search, where you begin at a home base. You know, the idea that it's why a lot of hotels in tourist destinations are always in the middle of the action, you know, across from Trafalgar Square or right across from the Eiffel Tower, you know, that kind of thing, where there's an oriented sort of search where we begin at a recognizable place and begin to make our way out. The second way, which is really easy, which is route finding, you know, the painted floor at a hospital, which I thought was really cool, or even better, which is the painted floor, but you also get what I call the splash of paint that you'll often see in a lot of trail country.
The blazes on the tree, yeah, Daniel Boone territory.
Yeah, exactly. And people did that. That goes all the way back to, you know, to the first explorers of this country, where it's like, "I'm going ahead, I'll leave you my sign." And then the one that, and then there's piloting, which is, you know, going from landmark to landmark, where you actually have a real sense. You have a map. Piloting is like having a map where you like, you know, like somebody gives you directions. "Okay, Peter, I want you to go to the second light, not the first one. Drive through that. Go to the second light. Take a left. You're going to come to the Conoco station. Take a right." That's landmarking it. You know what I'm saying? What is it? And don't turn until you see the Dunkin' Donuts. If you don't see the Dunkin' Donuts, that's piloting from landmark to landmark.
Yeah, I'm never able to follow those to the T. But when they're like 8 different directions, but keep going. I won't stop there.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I really think what it kind of comes down to, either you, and this is a way of kind of simplifying it, either you have a home base, there is a clearly marked route, or there are a series of recognizable landmarks or locations that allow you to navigate successfully because your ultimate destination is in the perimeter of the final landmark that you will encounter. And, you know, and it really kind of gets into the weeds and in a really good way of, like, you know, getting into target approximation and the idea that my favorite thing, though, this was the thing that really I thought was the best, that when people can't see, they instinctively begin to make a circle. And there was that great story that opened the entire chapter about the French trapper who got lost in the snow and always knew that if he thought he was going straight, he actually was going in a circle to the left. And so what he would do is take 10 steps and take 1 step to the right, take 10 steps and take 1 step to the right, and ended up able to walk along the bank of the river that saves his life.
He got to the shore. He was on a lake during a whiteout blizzard or something. I mean, there was just white everywhere. No reference whatsoever.
And it gets him, and by simply making that one adjustment, and then they're like, you know, is it our honing system that's off? But then they did a study and they found out that most people have one leg is shorter than the other, and so without any visual thing to kind of ground yourself in, a white out the fog that was on the mountain that you got lost on, without anything to ground them, they get lost because they don't have a visual thing. And what's really neat, and the thing is, and it's only a matter of yards in which we actually remember anything.
Amazingly short, these studies. These are scientific studies that, I mean, I think they said you can go, it's like maybe 10 meters. It's something like that. I mean, which is like 30 feet.
With a couple of techniques. A couple of techniques can expand it if you like stop and you point in that direction, but it's always about accumulating information. It's crazy.
Well, and the other thing that was so wild is that they timed it. There are all these different cool studies, but so in one, they timed it. How long could you walk in a certain direction before you started veering off that direction? If you didn't have a landmark, it was 8 seconds. That's how long you could walk without veering.
I kept thinking about that too, like 8 seconds on the back of a bull. The idea that it's like, I mean, there's some numbers that pop up in our world, but 8 seconds is like, that was like, oh my God. And then you just start moving in that direction. But once again, this is where it gets not problematic, but interesting. Now we know. So now we know what the French trapper does. You just take the step to the right.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we should, we were talking last episode about how in a way getting lost is such an American characteristic, and you had some really good thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get right back to it, because you can't find yourself until you lose who you once were. I mean, the very nature of being an American. I talked about this, the idea that everybody's from someplace else. It's the only. I will put my heart on my sleeve here, guys. There is no such thing as a blood and soil American. They just don't exist. They're not real. There is no birthright blood and soil. America is a state of mind. And the whole thing is that people who journey far to reinvent themselves, those are the quintessential Americans in my mind. And they can be born here and born into incredible wealth and privilege, and then one night lose both their wife and their mother in the same night, and in an act of grief head off to the Badlands and reinvent themselves as Teddy Roosevelt, as the Rough Rider himself.
That's what actually happened to him.
Yeah, I mean, and in many ways, that is a quintessential American story, though. I mean, the idea that the Germans liked that story so much, they actually turned it into a philosophical movement. Romanticism is actually inspired by the American idea of the man goes to the West. You know what I'm saying? He learns the ways of the West. And he comes back to a lawless place, and he brings his new energy, and it's William Tell. It's also the Lone Ranger, which, by the way, uses the William Tell overture. Right. But, by the way, the first chapter of The Last Empty Places, who went to that forest? Who goes to the Acadian forest? It's like you go there to find yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's the French. It's what your Jimmy's referring to. It reminded me of my own book. I hope I get it right, but it was when the first French colonists came from Europe to North America, and it was actually before the first British colonists set up Jamestown. And it's a great story, and it's really surprising.
Got to carve it out. They got to get in there and carve it out, man.
They had to carve it out, and it was cool that they had there was an Indian tribe there that and a leader, a chief, that ended up being friendly to them, and they had good relations, and I think they were helping each other out in various ways, and so the French, like literally, as Jimmy, you're saying, they carved it out.
It's brutal, and it's a dark place, man.
And they'd actually lost a couple of colonies before that. They had one like on an island off the coast of Maine, and that one, I think that succumbed to scurvy and starvation and
didn't bring their limes,
and freezing. It is, as you say, I think such an American thing, and I guess you could say French, Canadian thing. It's a North
American. It's an American thing because it's North America. It's an American thing. The idea is that there is this vast space, this vast empty place where people can come and simply become the person that France, feudal France, Bourbon France, and the idea that you can make a case that part of the reason why the British win to a large degree culturally over here is because they were already bursting at the seams. They just were too small. They had democratic dreams already that were bursting at the seams, and they're like, well, screw it, let's get the hell out of here and bring those energies over there. You know what I'm saying? So it's just so American to go out and do that, Peter. And by the way, look at you. What were you going? You'd find the meaning out there, right?
Yeah, find the meaning, and of course, with Europeans, it was partly about survival and and land and sustaining a family economically, But it was also, many people came for religious reasons. Many people came because they were escaping something. The guy who wrote the really up close account of the first French colony, coming to in the Nova Scotia area in 1606, I think, 1605, 1606, a guy named Les Carbot. And he was a lawyer in Paris. And he said, this really sucks. I'm so sick of being a lawyer in Paris. It's just like, everybody's bickering about with each other. And, it's like, it's just, I hate it. And so he bails out and he hops aboard this expedition that's trying to start the first French colony in the New World. And he's very literate. And so he ends up being the kind of the diarist for it. And
yeah, it helps if you can write, man. You can really make up a lot of stuff. If you can write, man, if you get there first and you got a good pen, you can really go a lot of grief.
Oh, you can really do it. Yeah. So, I mean, that reinvention, I think, is so characteristically American. But as you say, that you're shedding some tie to the old world in order to really become absorbed in this continent, to absorb yourself within this continent and become whatever this kind of mega culture is that we have.
The other thing about getting lost that's so crucial, and we're going to have to wrap this up here. What's so crucial about getting lost is that when you're lost, you have to focus on the moment at hand, the present.
Yeah.
And that you can't worry about what has happened in the past. The reason why people are able to shed their identities is because if you're not paying attention, you're going down the gorge. Because if you're not focused on the moment at hand, you're taking the wrong step. You're stepping on that snake. You're headed into the river that's too rough. You've got to focus on what is happening right now and let go of what has already transpired. It's over. It's done. It's time to go to the next landmark. We still got plenty to talk about.
We do. So, and I think maybe next time we pick up with that idea of getting lost forces you to pay attention and being in the moment. That would be something to address more next episode.
Can't wait. Lots more information to come. Please check out all these things that Clare Marie is going to tell you about. And until then, Peter Stark and I will talk to you at the next Last Empty Places.
Thank you, Jimmy.
The Last Empty Places is a Planet Clare production and lives at peterstarkauthor.com. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite platforms. Write to us on the contact page at peterstarkauthor.com. And in the meantime, head on out and find an adventure.